Hello, dear viewers. Today we'll talk about amazing creatures that have lived alongside us for thousands of years, dogs. They've become such a familiar part of our lives that we sometimes don't notice how many misconceptions about them have accumulated over centuries of coexistence. Many of these myths are so deeply rooted in our consciousness that we accept them as fact without even questioning their accuracy. Today we'll examine 11 of the most common myths about dogs and find out what's actually true and what's just a beautiful legend. Myth number 1. A dry and warm dog's nose is a sign of illness. Surely many have heard that if a dog's nose isn't wet and cold, but dry and warm, it means your pet is sick. But is this really true? Let's figure it out. The moisture and temperature of a dog's nose can change throughout the day depending on many factors. Weather, level of physical activity, even whether the dog was sleeping. After sleep, the nose is often warm and dry, but this doesn't mean the pet is ill. Dogs regulate body temperature not only through breathing, but also through moisture secretion through the nasal mucosa. So in hot weather, the nose is usually more moist. Veterinarians confirm that the condition of the nose is not the most reliable indicator of a dog's health. It's much more important to pay attention to your pet's behavior, appetite, activity, and general well-being. If the dog is energetic, active, eats and plays with pleasure, then a dry nose is unlikely to be a cause for concern. But if dryness is accompanied by lethargy, refusal to eat, coughing, or other unusual symptoms, then it's really worth showing your pet to a specialist. Remember that childhood case when everyone panicked about the family dog's warm nose, and then it turned out that she was simply lying in the sun or near a heater? Such situations happen often, and they only confirm that you shouldn't jump to conclusions based solely on the temperature of your four-legged friend's nose. Myth number 2. Dogs see the world in black and white. For a long time, it was believed that dogs don't distinguish colors and see the surrounding world like an old black and white film. This myth is so widespread that even now many people believe it. But what does science say? Research in recent decades has proven that dogs do see colors, although not as diversely as humans. Humans have 3 types of cones in the retina, cells responsible for color perception for red, green, and blue spectra. Dogs have only 2 such types. They better distinguish shades of blue and yellow, but red and green are practically indistinguishable to them. Imagine a world where a red traffic light looks like a dim yellowish one, and a green one looks like a pale yellowish one. That's approximately how dogs see traffic lights. But this doesn't mean they see the world in monochrome. Rather, their palette resembles a painting by an artist with dichromatic vision. They can clearly see the difference between a blue ball and a yellow one, but may confuse a red toy and green grass. This explains why dogs often lose sight of red toys on green grass. These colors look very similar to them, but they see blue and yellow objects perfectly. Consider this when choosing toys for your pet. Blue and yellow ones will be much more visible to them. Myth number 3. 1 year of a dog's life equals 7 human years. This myth is perhaps one of the most famous. Many are accustomed to calculating their pet's age by multiplying the number of years lived by 7. But does this formula really work? In fact, the relationship between dog and human age is much more complex. Dogs mature much faster than humans, especially in the first years of life. A 1-year-old dog, in terms of physical and psychological development, is closer to a 15-year-old teenager than to a 7-year-old child. But then the aging rate changes. A more accurate formula takes into account not only age, but also the dog's size. Large breeds, unfortunately, age faster than small ones. A 12-year-old Yorkshire Terrier might feel like a 60-year-old human, while a 12-year-old Saint Bernard, already like an 80-year-old. Scientists from the University of California have even developed a special formula for more accurately determining the human age of a dog, based on DNA changes with age. According to their research, a 1-year-old dog corresponds to a 30-year-old human, a 4-year-old, to a 52-year-old, and a 7-year-old, to a 69-year-old. So the old 1 to 7 rule turns out to be quite inaccurate. But of course, the main thing is not the number, but how active and healthy your dog is regardless of its official age. Myth number 4. Dogs eat grass only when they're sick. Many owners worry when they notice their pet eagerly eating grass during walks. It's believed that dogs do this only when they're ill, especially with digestive problems, to induce vomiting and clear the stomach. But is this really the only reason? Research shows that eating grass is completely normal behavior for dogs, and most of them do it regularly while being absolutely healthy. The wild ancestors of dogs, wolves, also sometimes eat plants, and this is part of their natural behavior. There are several reasons why dogs might eat grass. Yes, sometimes it really is a way to induce vomiting during stomach upset. But more often, dogs simply like the taste of certain plants or are looking for additional sources of fiber that they might lack in their regular diet. Some researchers believe it may be instinctive behavior aimed at getting rid of intestinal parasites. Rough plant food helps mechanically clean the intestines. Other specialists suggest that dogs simply enjoy variety in their diet, and grass is an accessible source of new tastes and sensations. Of course, you need to be careful and make sure your dog doesn't eat grass treated with pesticides or other chemicals. Also, pay attention to frequency. If your pet suddenly started eating grass in huge quantities, it might be a signal about digestive problems or a lack of certain substances in the diet. Myth number 5, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. This saying has become so firmly established in our lives that many don't even question its validity. It's often applied to people too, implying that the ability to learn decreases with age. But what does science actually say about the abilities of elderly dogs? Studies of dogs' cognitive functions show that although they may indeed have some learning difficulties with age, the claim about a complete inability to master something new is a myth. Elderly dogs can certainly learn, they just might need more time and patience from the owner. Moreover, regularly teaching new commands and tricks has a positive effect on the brain activity of elderly dogs, helping them maintain mental abilities and slowing the development of age-related cognitive disorders, the canine equivalent of dementia. Training for older dogs should be adapted to their physical capabilities, making sessions shorter, avoiding overly active or physically complex tricks, and rewarding successes more generously. But with the right approach, even a 12-year-old dog can master new commands and tricks. Animal behavior specialists note that training and mental stimulation are extremely important for dogs of any age. They maintain interest in life, strengthen the bond between pet and owner, and can even help deal with certain behavioral problems that sometimes arise in elderly animals. So if your pet is already quite old, don't be afraid to offer them something new to learn. It will benefit both their health and your relationship. Myth number 6. Dogs sense fear and attack people who are afraid of them. Many of us have heard the advice, don't show the dog you're afraid or it will attack. Do dogs really sense our fear, and is it true that this can provoke aggression? The first part of this statement is quite true. Dogs can indeed sense human fear. They have exceptionally keen sense of smell and can detect the scent of adrenaline and other hormones released when we experience fear. Additionally, dogs are excellent observers. They notice changes in body language, voice, and behavior that accompany fear. However, the second part of the myth, that a dog will necessarily attack a frightened person, is not true. A dog's reaction to human fear depends on many factors: the dog's character, upbringing, previous experience, the situation, and even breed characteristics. Some dogs sensing a person's fear may themselves become frightened or wary, since fear is often perceived by animals as a signal of potential danger. Others might show curiosity or even care. Well-socialized, balanced dogs rarely show aggression toward people, even if they are afraid of them. Of course, in some cases, a person's fear can provoke an unwanted reaction from a dog, especially if the animal is not confident or has had negative experiences with people. Fear can cause a person to make sudden movements, shout, or run away, which can activate hunting instincts in some dogs or be perceived as a threat. But the main conclusion, there is no universal rule that a dog will necessarily attack someone who is afraid of it. So if you experience fear of dogs, work on it gradually, but don't panic because of the thought that your fear automatically makes you a target for any dog. Myth number 7. A dog with a guilty look definitely did something wrong. Many dog owners are convinced they can tell if their pet has misbehaved by its guilty appearance: lowered head, flattened ears, guilty look from under the brows, tucked tail. It seems obvious that the dog is expressing guilt for a torn pillow or scattered garbage. But is this really the case? Research in animal behavior offers a different interpretation. What we perceive as a guilty look is actually an expression of fear or submission. The dog is responding not to its misdeed, but to your displeasure at the present moment. Dr. Alexandra Horowitz from Columbia University conducted an interesting experiment. She created situations where owners were told their dog had done something wrong, even when the pet was actually innocent. And the dogs demonstrated guilty behavior in response to the owner's displeasure, regardless of whether they had actually done anything wrong. This doesn't mean that dogs can't associate certain actions with negative consequences. They understand perfectly well that torn shoes or a puddle on the floor will cause the owner's displeasure. But the expression of guilt is a reaction to your behavior at the current moment, not a memory of the committed misdeed. When you come home and see a mess, your facial expressions, posture, and tone of voice change, even if you try to hide it. Dogs are amazingly sensitive creatures. They notice the slightest changes in your behavior and react to them by demonstrating a submissive posture, which we interpret as guilt. So the next time you see your pet's guilty look, remember, it doesn't necessarily mean they've done something wrong. Rather, they're reacting to your current emotional state. Myth number 8. Dogs only sweat through their tongues. You often hear that dogs don't sweat and cool down exclusively through their extended tongue, breathing heavily. This process is indeed very important for dogs' thermoregulation. The evaporation of saliva from the surface of the tongue and respiratory tract helps dissipate excess heat. But does this mean that dogs don't have sweat glands at all? In fact, dogs do have sweat glands, but they are structured differently than in humans. Dogs have two types of sweat glands, apocrine and eccrine. Apocrine glands are located throughout the body and mainly perform a pheromone function. They secrete substances involved in chemical communication between dogs. Eccrine sweat glands, responsible for thermoregulation, are located only on the pads of the paws in dogs. That's why in hot weather you can notice wet footprints from your pet. It really is sweat. But considering the small area of the pads, this cooling mechanism plays a secondary role compared to heat exchange through breathing. An interesting fact, it's because of the location of sweat glands on the paws that dogs often like to stand in cool water on a hot day. It helps them cool down. And some breeds, especially those with thick fur, may even dig holes in the heat to reach a cooler layer of soil and lie on it with their belly. This helps draw heat away from the body. So the next time you see your dog breathing heavily with its tongue out on a hot day, remember that this is its main but not the only way of cooling down. And don't forget to provide your pet with access to cool water and shade in hot weather, because the thermoregulation system in dogs is less efficient than in humans. Myth number 9. Dogs are colorblind. We've already discussed that dogs don't see the world in black and white, but in a limited color palette. But some go further and claim that dogs are colorblind. Let's understand this term and find out how applicable it is to our four-legged friends. Color blindness in humans is a disorder in the perception of certain colors, most often red and green. A colorblind person sees the world in color but cannot distinguish some shades. If we adhere to a strict definition, then yes, dogs can be called colorblind since they are worse at distinguishing red and green colors. But it's important to understand that this is not a pathology, but normal vision for dogs. Dogs' eyes evolved differently than human ones. The human retina usually has 3 types of cones, receptors responsible for color perception. Dogs have only 2 such types. The absence of the 3rd type of cone means that dogs don't see the full spectrum of colors available to the human eye, but the world is still not monochromatic for them. Interestingly, dogs see better than humans in twilight and can distinguish moving objects at a much greater distance. Evolutionarily, for a predator, this was more important than the ability to distinguish all the colors of the rainbow. Understanding the peculiarities of dog vision can help you when choosing toys for your pet. Dogs see blue and yellow toys better than red ones. If you want your dog to easily find a ball in the grass, choose bright blue or yellow. These colors will stand out well against a green background in dog perception. Myth number 10. Puppies from the same litter should not fight with each other. Many owners of several dogs from the same litter worry when they see their pets begin to compete or even fight with each other. There is an opinion that puppies born in the same litter should always get along with each other due to blood relationship. But does this correspond to reality? In fact, puppies from the same litter are still separate individuals with their own characters, dominance, and temperament. In nature, wolf cubs, even being brothers and sisters, establish hierarchical relationships within the pack. Domestic dogs also retain these instincts, albeit in a milder form. The period of early socialization of puppies, when they learn the rules of communication with each other through play, includes elements of forceful clarification of relationships. This is a normal developmental process that helps puppies understand the boundaries of acceptable behavior and their place in the group. Problems can arise when puppies grow up and reach sexual maturity, usually between 6 months and 2 years of age. During this period, they may begin to compete more seriously for resources and status, especially if they are of the same sex and approximately the same size. It's important to understand that some breeds are prone to greater intraspecific aggression than others. For example, terriers and some guard breeds may show stronger rivalry between individuals. Additionally, castration and sterilization can help reduce the level of hormonally conditioned aggression. Of course, owners should ensure that conflicts between dogs don't cross a dangerous line. It's necessary to provide each pet with its own place to rest, its own toys, and enough attention. For serious problems, it makes sense to consult an animal behavior specialist. Myth number 11. Dogs can crossbreed with wolves in the wild. Many believe that any dog can easily crossbreed with a wolf in the wild, resulting in viable hybrids. Many stories and legends are based on this myth, but what does science say? From a genetic standpoint, dogs and wolves can indeed crossbreed and produce viable offspring. In fact, they belong to the same biological species, Canis lupus, with the dog considered a subspecies of the wolf, Canis lupus familiaris. But in real life, such matings are extremely rare for several reasons. First, the breeding seasons of wolves and most dogs don't coincide. Wolves breed only once a year, usually in late winter, while many dogs have heat twice a year, and some breeds have even more specific cycles. Second, in the wild, wolves usually avoid contact with humans, and consequently with domestic dogs. They are territorial and more often perceive dogs as competitors or threats rather than potential mating partners. Another factor is size. Many modern dog breeds are significantly smaller than wolves, which makes physical mating difficult or impossible. Even if mating occurs between a small dog and a wolf, pregnancy and birth can be dangerous for the female dog. Existing wolf-dog hybrids, such as the Czechoslovakian Volkak or Sarlus wolf-dog, were created under controlled conditions as a result of purposeful selective breeding. They often have behavioral characteristics that make them less suitable as domestic pets compared to regular dogs. So, although theoretically crossbreeding of dogs and wolves is possible, in the wild it happens extremely rarely, and romantic ideas about such unions are greatly exaggerated. We've now examined 11 popular myths about dogs. We hope this information was useful and interesting for you. Dogs are amazing creatures with a rich inner world and complex behavior. And the more we learn about them, the better we can understand them and ensure they have a happy life alongside us. Remember that each dog is unique, with its own character and peculiarities, and it's important to observe your pet to understand its individual needs and preferences. Don't blindly rely on general ideas and myths. The science of animal behavior is constantly evolving, and many of yesterday's truths are being reconsidered today. Thank you for your attention. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share it with friends, especially those who still believe in these common myths about dogs. Until next time.